Natural Order Podcast, Episode 16, Year in Review, 2023, Part 1. Welcome to the Natural Order Podcast, with your hosts, Brian O'Leary and Adam Haman. All right, folks. Welcome back to the Natural Order Podcast. Brian O'Leary here with you, with Adam Haman, as always.
Hello, Brian. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year. And we thought, so we've been at this a little over a year, even though probably the recordings didn't start until, I can't remember, not quite a year as we're recording this today. But we wanted to kind of go over the year in review for 2023, since we're now into 2024, and a lot of things happened, a lot of odd things. We got to comment on a lot of current events during the time of our podcast, and we kind of want to throw that in here and there. And I think today, even though it's not current, I believe we want to just comment a bit about the year that was 2023, and Adam provided a link, which we'll get to in a second, but he provided me a link from the CBSnews.com year in review, top news stories of 2023 month by month. So I figure we're going to start at the beginning of last year, January 2023, and kind of go through some of their top news stories intermixed with some of the stuff we did, and we'll see how it goes. We already agreed that it'll probably take more than just one episode to get through. What say you, Adam?
I think that's probably right, and I would just like to give an explanation and perhaps an apology for choosing a CBS link. I don't recommend that particular organization as a source of truth. But the old Google just replied to my search query, 2023 year in review, with a couple of links, and this one popped up. And I will trust CBS not to lie that these things actually happened last year.
Right, right.
And it does give us a launching off point to talk about some of the very strange things that happened in a very strange year that was 2023.
Yeah, and it's funny, one of our first current event episodes last year, we talked about the Ron DeSantis in Florida as a governor, not as a presidential candidate necessarily, but the whole drag queen story hour nonsense. And you can go back and listen to that. That's episode 4. But you mentioned early on in that episode that it's where you get your news that makes a lot of difference.
It sure does.
So
yeah, I want to throw that caveat and disclaimer in there.
Okay. So let's just start with CBS, what they thought was the big news in last January, where we started off our program. We kind of envisioned it last November or December, but didn't really kick off till the beginning of the new year. But this is a story we didn't comment on until much later, and we'll talk about that perhaps as we go. But it was the turmoil in the U.S. House of Representatives and Kevin McCarthy becoming elected as Speaker. And a lot of times we don't really recall, because the latest news was that he eventually got ousted, but it was a big controversy there in January, whether he was going to get elected or not, or how he was going to get elected. Anyway, any thoughts there, Adam?
Well, first, I'll just assume that CBS decided to make this the event of January, just as kind of throw some mud in the eye of the Republican Party, who I'm sure they're not in favor of. But I do think it was interesting and notable because it highlights a shift that is, I think, occurring in that party, where more liberty-oriented, or at least giving serious lip service to that concept, members of the party are trying to hold the regime's feet to the fire about the things that are ostensibly their principles. I don't think small government has been a principle of the Republican Party for a long time, but it is something they talk about. And I think it's interesting that this was a huge example of a civil war that's brewing. I don't think it's just a war on populism terms, as exemplified by Donald Trump, for example. I think it's about philosophy, and I find it interesting. And, I'm rooting for the underdogs because they're certainly a lot more personal liberty oriented than folks like Lindsey Graham and Mitch McConnell.
Right. And we commented a bit, not on a civil war necessarily, but the concept of a natural divorce. And that was in our episode number 7. And this whole thing with the U.S. House of Representatives trying to find a speaker at that point, it was more of a, what would you say, like you said, a battle within the party, because the Democrats, they just want to see chaos, I believe, within the Republican ranks, so they get more of a foothold in on a power of their own right. But it, as we'll talk about, I think, and we did in episode 13, where this crisis came to another boil in last October. So the Republican Party they got a lot of problems. Let's put it that way. As a political party, as do the Democrats.
They deserve to have a lot of problems.
I agree.
They're terrible.
Yeah, and I think that it's interesting you mentioned the word or the term civil war, because there's a new movie coming out. I saw a trailer of what a potential civil war would look like, and apparently there's a new movie that the Obamas produced also along that line that's coming out. So we'll see. I mean, it's all couched in the kind of the leftist worldview on how that all goes. So we'll see how that plays out. And we're not really a film critic podcast, but if that comes out eventually, and we have not already swallowed our lunch, maybe we talk about that down the road. But that's just what's coming up ourselves in 2024.
So moving right along, if you've said your piece about McCarthy and the wretched GOP, CBS tells us that the big story in February was something about a Chinese spy balloon. When I saw this, I just had to laugh. Do you remember that idiocy? What do you think was going on there?
Yeah, I think there was one group or one side, or however you want to say, that called it a Chinese spy balloon. Other people noticed it as a rogue weather balloon off pattern.
Yeah.
And, it was like, it's a balloon. They had spy balloons in the Civil War, for crying out loud.
That's right.
We now have fighter jets and planes and drones and satellite technology that can spy much easier than, say, a spy balloon could. So I don't put much stock into the fact that it was a Chinese spy balloon, but maybe it was. I don't know.
Yeah, I didn't look too deeply into this because I thought the whole thing was silly, and still do. But my current operating theory that I'm not interested enough to even try to falsify is that we have balloons up there from all sorts of different private and state institutions, and they're just up there all the time. I mean, it could have been something as simple as the military changed the resolution on their radar and how they're tracking things. And oh my God, they started seeing things all over the place. Because remember, it wasn't just one balloon.
Right.
There's 3 or 4 or 5 of them that we got our panties up in a bunch about.
And do you think China throws a fit when, say, the U.S.
right
tosses something over their vast country? I don't know. I doubt it.
Yeah, I found it.
Or how many of them are
hilarious.
Lost to
right
Chinese military action on their soil or above their airspace or whatever.
And we are constantly surveilling, Russia, China, whoever. It just seemed really preposterous. And I'm with you. I'm not convinced it was a Chinese anything. But it did manage to sell a few extra Sidewinder missiles for, what was it, $400,000 a pop?
Yeah.
Plus the cost to launch it.
Yeah. So Dwight Eisenhower's
Right.
words about the military-industrial complex, they still ring true.
Yep.
Now 65 years later-ish, about. So
Yeah.
it's
That python has got a firm grip around our neck, and I don't know if it'll ever get pried loose.
Yeah. All right. And then so CBS goes, the big story in March is that Donald Trump indicted New York for the first of his 4 criminal indictments, and I think they're now up to 6, if I recall. I don't know that for sure, but I thought there were 6. But
when it comes to indictments on Donald Trump, I'm like a crow.
Yeah.
I go 1, 2, 3, and then many. You know, I can't conceptualize numbers higher than 3.
Yeah. I hear you. And
it's many indictments.
And so maybe we comment on this a little bit as it applies to now we are seemingly we were in the midst of a election cycle from the very get-go after the 2020 election so-called ended, and we are now in the election year proper in 2024. We'll see what happens in November, but speculation out there is that at least within the Republican Party, the aforementioned Republican Party in chaos and turmoil and whatever, they're having their inner battles, that these indictments could ironically strengthen Trump, and it seems like they have, because Trump's
according to the poll numbers, they already have.
Yeah. And because what the last 2016 election cycle, Trump, he obviously had the "Make America Great Again" slogan, and he tried at least use a trial balloon, if you will, for his new slogan to be "I am your retribution."
I mean, whether he makes it official or not, it's sort of true, right?
Mm-hmm.
Well, I have a question for you.
Mm-hmm.
A little, not prognostication, but I want you to do a little mind reading.
Of you?
No. What number am I thinking of? No. Of the population in the country, after they saw what the deep state did to Donald Trump, for 4 years, hemming him in and distorting his foreign policy and everything else, and then all these indictments, prosecutions that you're referencing, and what various members of the government did to influence the social media platforms, for the last 8 years, basically. Here's my question. What percentage of the populace in this country do you think recognizes and admits, maybe to themselves only, maybe not to their friends, but recognizes that obviously the deep state and the Democratic Party are weaponizing our justice system just because they do not want this political opponent of theirs, who they view as an orange pariah, to win the presidency? How many people can see it? And it would, these prosecutions are not normal.
Right.
It's not, there's no one above the law, and that ridiculous catechism. How many people, even including the Democrats, see that this is just a political put-up job?
Gosh, the percentage basis of the electorate, the people that will likely vote, I guess.
Okay. Yeah, you can
right.
you can slice the pie any way you want.
I'd probably say 20%. The old Pareto principle, 20, 80, 20. I don't think people think that deeply. Largely, I could be totally off base here, but I think
80.
I think
80 going which way?
80 going there. No, it's not a. Or 20 going like, yeah, it is a put up job, like you said.
Oh, that's pretty low. I mean,
I
would
think it is
assume
low.
Almost all the Republicans would see that.
But I don't know that if they see it in those terms, I guess is what I'm getting at. I think they see like, oh, they're after Trump. They don't care if it's real or not, but we just hate the Democrats so much or what they're trying to do that we're going to get behind him, whether he's guilty or not.
We are hearing the term, and the weaponization of the Department of Justice is in the zeitgeist. So people are thinking along those terms. I would have put it at about 65-35 the other way.
Okay.
I think
my initial reaction was 50-50 because it just kind of like cuts down, roughly even terms on where maybe popular vote or electoral college would vote. But when you dive into the motivation behind it, I gotta lean more toward the 20 because we talk about in many cases, if you're on Twitter or whatever, Twitter is not real life. And if I were doing a Twitter poll, yeah, it would be 80-20 the other way or 65-35 for sure.
Right.
For sure.
Right.
But that's not who the American people are, I don't believe. And
you make a good point.
And so my initial reaction, like I said, was at least 50, perhaps up to 80 the other way but I just don't see the American people acting that way. I see that largely on the Democratic side, they want Trump out no matter what. And they don't care about the motivation. They won't even look at the fact
and
that
they don't care about the precedent either. They don't care about the dangerous precedent that it sets.
No.
Supposedly one of the main virtues of democracy is that it provides a peaceful transfer of power. And you start doing stuff like this to your political opponents, and then we lose that virtue right quick.
Yeah, and Trump, say what you will about the guy, not the most virtuous fellow, let's put it that way. But you have presidents in the past that were, I just go back to Bill Clinton, like much more of a scoundrel in many ways. And, the Republicans tried with the whole Ken Starr thing. And, he's a bad guy. Bill Clinton is a bad guy, no matter how you cut it. Great politician, but a bad guy. And the Republicans did this dog and pony show with his impeachment thing. And it didn't obviously work. And so the Democrats doubled down. They did it to Trump twice. And, the thing, they play for keeps. I think with these Republicans back in the 90s, they were trying to have this more civil way of going about this and doing it by the book and whatever. That just doesn't work. The Democrats now, they don't have that same playbook they're playing by. They're playing for keeps. They don't care about the rules necessarily that we had in the past, and they are just going for the throat, going for the jugular of Donald Trump and his whole entire movement, which is not entirely a bad motivation politically, but as far as a civilized culture or a culture without chaos, that doesn't play, and we're seeing the fruits of that play out now, and we're becoming even more bifurcated. And we talked about the whole idea of national divorce. I always say natural divorce because of our name of our podcast, which is kind of ironic as we can think about it. But
you brought up the impeachment of Bill Clinton, and the Republicans not playing for keeps. It's worse than that because correct me if I'm wrong. The impetus for the impeachment was the Monica Lewinsky scandal, right?
Yeah, that was one of the that was tied up in a whole other,
or telling a lie or something.
Right.
Well, they've got Ruby Ridge there, and they've got Waco.
Yep.
Well, they didn't give a goddamn about any of that. If you're talking about crimes of this administration,
right?
They're going to go after him for a blowjob. Mm-hmm. You are not serious people. You're not the moral party. You're not the respectable party. You're just doing dim-witted partisan chicanery, and you're doing it stupidly.
Mm-hmm.
And, I'm not rooting for these guys.
Yeah.
But you're right. I mean, the Democrats are much more serious, and they're setting their sights on Trump, and 6 prosecutions later, we'll see what happens.
Yeah, it's interesting too. You mentioned that because going through some of our old episodes, we mentioned that the aforementioned DeSantis Florida thing, and in there, I believe you brought up the idea: do we want political solutions to moral problems? Right. And largely, I say no. But guess what they're doing? That's what the Democrats are doing. Their morality is not the same as it was, say, a generation prior. It's a different morality because leftism in general today is a religion. They proselytize that religion in many ways. Right. And so their morality is couched in this new secular religion of theirs. Say what you will about it, but I'm also not particularly concerned in legislating morality, but I am interested in shutting down the voice of those proselytizing this other brand of morality that is just not coherent. And it's also not.
So in the vein of all roads lead to Rome, all of our discussions lead to national divorce.
Perhaps, yeah.
I mean, how can people with 2 wildly opposing value systems live in the same polity?
It doesn't really work. It doesn't really work. And I made some notes that, I just believe that the whole American experiment was, fatally flawed from the start. And I just want to know, how do we exist in the current age based on all these traditions and, whether it's government or politics or culture, how do we exist now? It's fast forwarded to the point where it might not really be the same thing. And we talked about national divorce in episode 7. And I think then that was in the summertime, that was kind of on the, and we'll might get to it here as the year in review. We were kind of sidetracked here, but I was going to say that in the summer, it seemed like when we picked that topic to talk about, it was in the ether. Yeah. Now, with this new election cycle, because as Americans, we believe in elections and democracy, supposedly, this is all supposed to play out in who gets elected president in November upcoming. And so this whole idea of national divorce is going to been put on the back burner, if not, taken off the stove altogether. So
no matter what happens in November, it's going to come up again.
It will fester. It will fester madly once again.
Madly.
So, yeah.
What do you think about Tucker Carlson's prognostication that if none of this stuff works, if these DOJ weaponization trials don't work, and if Donald Trump looks like he's going to win the presidency, do you think that somebody's going to try and JFK him?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I imagine there's people that are already out there planning it, but I mean, how to do it and where to do it and whatever.
Call up Vladimir Putin. He's got a pretty good track record in getting these things taken care of.
Well, the Clintons do, allegedly.
The Clintons do too. Yeah. We don't need to outsource things. We don't outsource jobs in this country anymore, Brian.
There's been a few suicides.
By American.
There's been a few suicides on their watch where they the victim of the suicide is shot in the back of the head. So I don't know. I don't know how that works. I think Trump's got a lot of folks around him and people around him that I think if there were to be suicide by gunshot, it would not be pretty. It would not be pretty. There'd be a lot of dead people. So maybe that's the one reason why. Now, if he was going to get...
Yeah, I doubt they'll do it too. I think they don't need to anymore. JFK was a particular emergency situation, but I think these days they can just hem the guy in or poison him.
Yeah, and I think what you're right about the whole hemming it all in idea is that we're coming to the point where it's not really Trump. It's not really Biden. Those people are not in control. There's some managerial elite type thing that is in control of all the mechanics of government and media and whatever. And they're not necessarily on the same page altogether, but there is this kind of elite thing that the general populace still doesn't understand. And you go back to the point that we made earlier about where do you get your news? Well, right. It's these same companies that have their news. We have these podcasts. Low barrier of entry, by the way, to get into a podcast if you want. But the question is, how do you get your voice out? I want to silence the voices of all these people that don't agree with me. And I agree with their right to have speech, but I don't want to hear it. I'm going to do everything I can to get my voice and my freedom of speech.
Brian, we all know you want to silence the voices. Back in episode 4, I got you on record that you want to nuke Miami over this whole trans Christmas thing. So we know.
Yeah, that was a interpretation of my words.
I'm pretty sure I heard you loud and clear, buddy.
Yeah.
So getting back to CBS, if you think we've mined this this
good
March news source, excuse me. They say the news event in April was talk about something that's could only happen last year. Some very young 21-year-old airman supposedly leaked a bunch of classified Pentagon documents on a Discord server for video game participants. That's not something, that's not your grandfather's government classified information leak. That's some pretty modern stuff.
Yeah, I don't even remember that story until you brought it up, and
it's the story of the day for April, for the month of April. That's the only thing that happened, Brian. Yeah. CBS told us.
Yeah, and I would just say that in today's technological world, that stuff like this, whether it's real information or false information, it's gonna get out one way or another, in many ways. And you have very little, or the government, lack of better terms, deep state, however you want to call it, they have not very much power for it to get out. Now, when it does come out, they have a lot more power than they did before to shut that voice down and punish people
or to drown it out. To change the narrative,
gaslight
so I have
and
all
that stuff,
I have basically two things. I mean, this is a small, unimportant news event, but I have two things that make it interesting. And one is one that you just alluded to. It's harder and harder for the government to keep its secrets, and I view this as a good thing. Edward Snowden, Julian Assange, these weirdo, I wouldn't call him a whistleblower. I don't know what this kid thinks he was doing, but as you say, it's very difficult for them. Leaks just slip through their fingers, and they still do have incredible weapons about minimizing the damage by drowning out the voices.
The whole Assange thing's still playing out.
Still playing out. It really is, yeah. And the other thing is, I remember the video of them coming to get this kid, and I thought, what are you doing, people? You need to send all this manpower and firepower, for this guy. It's like the government's show of force.
They did a very similar thing to Roger Stone, like him or not.
Yes, exactly. Same thing. And I'm sure somebody who knows more about the Roman Empire than I do could probably say something, about there's some sort of what do you call it? A mirroring, What does it mean in an empire when they start over exaggerating and showing uses of force that are wildly out of proportion for what is required? You don't need to send a SWAT team for Roger Stone. You don't need to send the 10X military version of a SWAT team to get this 21-year-old who's probably in his underwear playing video games at that moment. It's nuts.
Right. And
what does it mean? It must mean something.
And a guy I don't really follow, but I come to know who he is a little bit, and I don't necessarily know if I agree with him a whole lot, but he has a voice, is Tim Pool. And I think his studio got swatted 4 or 5 times over the last couple of years. He's just a podcaster. Like we get swatted, as we're doing this, for crying out loud. I don't know exactly what he was doing. He's a little
fine day,
more
Brian,
edgy.
we'll get there.
Yeah.
We'll get
Good
there.
grief. But it's a way overreaction for what this is, and it's, I think, ultimately the show of force is more important to them than the use of force.
Yes.
Is that possible? Good
No, I
analysis?
think that's true. I think they do it for the cameras. They'll tell you they're following a protocol and, got to keep your officers safe. And I'm sure they'll send some other story, but I think it's for the cameras. I think it's to make you afraid so that you'll shut the hell up and not do stuff like this in the future.
Yeah, lest we forget, from March of 2020 to somewhere certainly in the midst of 2022, the same thing was happening with the whole COVID nonsense in many states.
Right. That's right.
And, like the famous thing about this cop running down and tackling, or one guy got tackled on the beach for just being outside on the beach in Southern California. Like, there's no safer spot to be if this was this mass, viral event that everybody's going to die from. You're like, you should be on the beach. You shouldn't be at home stuck in. And then what is the cop doing out there? Why is the cop so important that he can be out there making sure that all these people are following rules? And it's just like, it's so insane. Oh yeah, you're an essential worker. I was like, okay, well, actually, you know what? I was considered an essential worker at the same time. I didn't get sick the entire time. I was in front of a lot of people when nobody else was, and didn't get sick at all. And I had to carry around papers. We mentioned this in the past, but it's just like, it's so bizarre and so bothersome. But again, it's just one of these deals where these things will pop up, and they cow people into believing the narrative, and then here we are.
It's it all boils down to what the great sage of our times, Eric Cartman, used to say: "Respect my authority."
Yeah.
They demand that we respect their authority, and when it looks like we're not, well, here comes the show of force. And only because you mentioned the swatting of Tim Pool, I just want to get it on record that I don't know how they're treating these acts when somebody calls in a fake, whatever it is you say to the cops to get somebody swatted, but that should be treated as attempted murder, right?
Oh yeah.
I mean, what are you hoping? You're elevating the risk that that your target gets murdered by the police. Mm-hmm. That's an attempted murder right there. And we really ought to start viewing it that way.
Yeah. I wrote down a quote. I think it's apropos. The old columnist Joe Sobran wrote that life always seems hopelessly complex to people who have no principles.
Ooh, that's a good one.
So in light of our podcast, whether we agree in lockstep on the principles that we espouse, it's not that complex for us as far as I understand. It's not that complex. We have principles that we act upon, or we can rely upon to act upon, and comment out there into the world. It's not that complex. Like, if you listen to our show in the past, it's not that complex. But to your point of this whole thing with the kid that, or the young man that leaked the secrets and the show of force and everything else, it seems complex to everybody else because there's no principle involved except for terror or whatever. I hate that word now, but I don't know if that.
No, you make a good point, and I love that quote because having principles is like a cheat code, in your understanding of the world.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you have none, then yeah, it must look like an awful lot of noise and chaos. But if you do have principles, that will help you find the signal in the noise and understand what's going on and how you should act. It's very useful.
Right. Yeah. All right. And so in May, the big story worldwide.
The biggest story.
The biggest story of May.
So big.
The coronation of Charles III and Camilla as a king and queen in the United Kingdom.
Well, I'm not falling for it, Brian. I think we should move right on because England's not a real country or place anyway. So, yeah, I don't care about.
Well, it's the United Kingdom. England is a constituent part of the United Kingdom.
It's like you trying to tell me all the vagaries of Narnia.
Yeah,
it's not real, Brian. There's no such place.
Yeah. All right. In June, two tragedies at sea: the implosion of the Titan submersible killed 5, and the sinking of a fishing trawler off the Greek coast killed more than 500 migrants. Let's attack the trawler off the Greek coast first. I don't recall that at all because this Titan submersible really was a bigger story for the U.S. media in June. But do you remember much about the that Greek trawler?
No, that's interesting. I, of course, take CBS News at their word that this occurred, but I'm with you. This morning when I saw this was the first I'd ever heard of it, which is,
yeah, I vaguely recall it, but I think there were migrants.
That's a lot of people to get. And was it just the fact that it was one of these flimsy, ramshackle things, and it was crowded with, way too many people, and it just sank?
Yeah, it was. I mean, if you look at the picture, it was just like a fishing boat that looked like they had the amount of people that are on a normal cruise ship. So,
right. Yeah, I remember a lot of them being so overwhelmed with extra people, and I knew there was some accidents, but I didn't realize there was one that was that massive. That's
yeah, they said they rescued over 100 migrants. More than 80 bodies were recovered, and then over 500 people, or as many as 500 people, are still missing and feared to be dead at this point. But
and if this is typical of the migration, this is kind of on us, or rather our overlords, right? I mean, aren't these people that are fleeing the chaos that our policies have wrought upon the Middle East? Isn't that mostly who these people are?
Yeah, I think they said the people were Afghanis, Egyptians, Libyans, Palestinians, Pakistanis, Syrians. So yeah, there you go. How they got to where they were going to get into the boat, who knows? But how do African nationals get to El Paso or Texarkana or San Diego? It's like,
yeah, that's probably a topic too big for this show, but it's got my antennae twitching too. What the hell's going on here?
Mm-hmm. And then
this other one,
yeah.
Oh my Lord, that's a weird one.
Yeah, I think that has everything to do with how bizarre the news media is and how they want clicks more than reporting news. I mean, if you just
right.
I mean, a small vessel, if you just took the evidence in play, not the theories or whatever, you clearly almost immediately these people would have died. And not that you could have found it. Like the thing blew up or imploded. I mean, I think
immediately. Yeah.
Eventually, what they decided was that it imploded, but it had to have imploded immediately. Like you didn't have we got 5 more hours of oxygen. We've got 3 more hours of oxygen. There's probably just one person left in there. And no, it was a
I heard
flimsy,
echoes
it's
of
a flimsy exploration vehicle.
But they had to keep that hope alive to sell more stories.
Sure, they did.
And I just heard echoes of that Malaysian, airliner during that whole time, as the stories just kept going and going and going, and leading the populace to believe that these people are rescuable when obviously they're not.
Right.
Do you think? What do you think it was that made this such a big story? Was it the Titanic angle, or was it
that was a huge part of it?
The private submarine aspect, or
I think a little bit
woke and dumb all the people involved were?
I think all of the above, right? And I think, the fact that they're, the whole idea that the Titanic, 1912, it still holds a lot of cultural currency.
It really does.
And that whole deal. But I don't know. I mean, and the fact that there was, rich people involved in there, and you're privately going down. And then I think ultimately, although I don't think it's ever really stated, what they want is like, they don't want private exploration of the seas, of the space, of the frontier. That, to the left's mind, that's bad. We need the state involved in all that, because you stupid rubes see what happens to you when you go try and do things on your own when you're not following the dictums of the state. I think that's ultimately what's underneath.
I think you're right. I think they're all secretly rooting against every rocket that Elon Musk puts in the air for similar reasons.
Oh, yeah.
Who do you think you are, NASA?
Yeah. All right. Well, we're running up against it, and that is we got through 6 months of it, so I guess we'll probably finish the rest of the year, which could take 2 or 3 parts here in the next show. But any last words of wisdom for what happened in January through June of 2023, Adam?
I'm sorry to say that I don't. It was a crazy year. The last half of the year that we're going to talk about next episode or more is equally insane. And it was fun talking about it in this episode with you, and it has been fun launching this podcast with you together. I hope we get to talk about lots more fun stuff going forward.
Yeah. All right. Well, folks, you can find our website over at naturalorderpodcast.com, where you can find all the episodes. And until next time, we will chat at you down the road. Bye. For more, head on over to naturalorderpodcast.com. The show notes for today's episode can be found at naturalorderpodcast.com/ep16. That's naturalorderpodcast.com/ep16.